pile our barnacles up and get a view over the top of the whale?
Well, in slow motion, it's happening, like on the internet. For example, what I do is essentially the kind of talking to you about psychedelics is the kind of conversation that 30 years ago could only happen among the nearest and dearest of friends across a kitchen table. And the news was tremendous, almost like a revelation. For instance, I guess one of the things I'm most well known for is the concept of self-transforming machine elves. I encountered them in DMT. I named them, described them, raved about them, wouldn't shut up about them. But they have gone from being my private domain to being a recognized class of phenomena. In fact, self-transforming machine elves is now abbreviated as STEMs. And I noticed they're just referred to this way. Say, broke into crimson space, several dozen stems present, process, and it's like, so the meme has been launched. And we now are having the end of the world conversation about our gender identities, about our past, about our experiences, about the future. We are, the image I have is almost of an aircraft that is attempting to redesign itself in flight. You know, we're a Sopwith Camel, we're a biplane chugging along, but we're approaching the sound barrier. We have to completely redesign our airfoil, or the wings are going to be ripped off and we're going to plunge to the unfriendly territory below. And we do this by talking to each other and by leveling with each other and by discovering the nature of our own psyches and societies and then attempting to communicate it.
Could you say something further about the kind of slightly sinister nature of the types?
It isn't sinister. Well, perhaps it is. Let me say how it appears to me. They're reckless, and their brand of comedy is a little too much to the Marx Brothers end of the spectrum. You know, or even further than that, it's the Three Stooges. Too much of the hammer on the head and the two fingers in the eye trip. Not that they've ever done anything like that, but they're elves, they're gnomes. The relationship of human beings to fae is uncertain, and sometimes they reassure. In DMT, I almost always find them reassuring that they're true kibiri, true alchemical children. And I think I've quoted for you the 54th fragment of Heraclitus, which says the aeon is a child at play with colored balls. But sometimes, and this has a lot to do with, I don't know, the DMT and physiological factors and this and that, sometimes there's an angry, insectile intensity to what happens where you just say, wow, it's just, you know? I can hear it in these whistles. That's what I was mentioning, that there's a place in there which skilled people who could sustain it could just summon this thing right up. So, I don't know, sometimes in the hallucinations you have the intimation that it's a dimension that even the mushroom is not fully in command of. I mean, I've had experiences where I felt that I was appalled and the mushroom was appalled. The mushroom and I were playing under a bush like two children when suddenly the shadow of something passed by and the mushroom said, you know, let's just sit very still for a minute. And then this thing proceeds. It's okay now. We can go back to what we were doing. I don't know, whether this is human psychology. We don't know the ecology of souls. We don't know what goes on in hyperspace. We have our cheerful assurances, but sometimes there seem to be piratical beings that don't hold an allegiance to all of these things. This is when you don't want to bungle your mantras. This is when you want to have a quick Om Tat Sat ready to let fly. All of these things work in that dimension. They don't ever seem to work in any other dimension. But in that dimension, they, thank God you studied all this Tibetan Buddhism and all this malarkey, because now you need it, So, I don't know, traders, tykes, extraterrestrials, I had the feeling that it's hard for them to communicate. I don't know how clearly we are perceived. My DMT trips got friendlier and friendlier as I sort of prompted them to get their act a little more together and to have a care for what a human being can put up with. The first DMT trip was absolutely appalling. I mean, I felt like the big people were home. And I had just broken into this place where these things were turning and saying, what is this? Then the next time they had the little bassinet and the colored dancing things and the little toys all ready. But the first time they were taken by surprise, and they were just, does anyone have a fly swatter handy? It was that kind of thing. I don't know. You have to have your wits about you. This is no place for people who are true believers. I mean, I think that psychedelic people have to be like, you have to be street smart. That's what I think I bring to this, that many of my professional colleagues who are, lettered and so forth and so on, they're not street smart. They don't know how to cut a deal at the center of an Indian ghetto surrounded by 5 million people who, if they knew how much money was on your body, would cut you to pieces in a fraction of a moment, They're all in their head. It helps to be on your toes. It really repays real attention, not some kind of off in space attention, but this is like trading with cannibals, or trading with an Amazonian tribe. It's weirder than that. They're offering something, you're trying to get something, you need to bring something, then there's negotiation. This is happening across God knows what kind of intellectual and dimensional gulfs. So I say, if you're going to trade in cyberspace, you just have to be on your toes. They're not evil, but they are tricky, mischievous, mercurial. Their idea of a joke may not entirely tally with your idea of a joke. Last question. One last question. Here.
Was there any sense of personalization so that when you, in them, would you recognize one as a character that you could come back to and say, I've seen you before, or were they different each time?
No, it's hard to describe them. I can't say that it's the same ones or different ones. It's the same species. It's a kind of being. They don't have a solid body geometry. They are a hallucination in a hallucination. They are a part of the hallucination that has separated itself from the background of hallucination and has come forward to chat with you. The whole thing is not even happening in ordinary space-time. They appear to be hyperdimensional creatures. That's why they're changing so fast. That's the hyperdimensional aspect of them. They cannot appear as a solid object in a lower dimensional space. And of course, what they're doing is urging that you try to create this visible language, that syntax for them is something beheld, and they make the imagination out of sound. They are somehow able to become what they behold, and they can generate what they behold. So they are like a mind and a language at the same time. You can't tell, is this a mind or is it a language? It seems to be both at once. We have minds, we speak languages. This thing doesn't have that relationship to these things. Perhaps it's a creature of pure language. Well, what is that? Well, who knows? How do you relate to something which is made not of molecules but of syntax? Is it a poem or is it a person? I mean, our categories are just scrambled so badly that you can't tell Agnes from Angus. So how could you tell, hyperspatial creatures from the language that they're speaking? This is the frontier of knowing. This is where all the exciting work remains to be done. One more.
Yeah. Do you think, as I know you, do you see yourself maybe using psychedelics and coming to a point where you are psychedelic and would no longer need this kind of access? In other words, that the plants themselves has educated you to a point in the future where you would no longer need them because you have activated those yourself?
No, because talking about it isn't being there. I think that nothing I've said has been true to the object, that these are all lower dimensional slices. There is no end to the program of elaborating a new language for describing this. I can't see how it would ever end. My psychedelic career will end when my courage fails, but I will never encompass, nor will anybody else, what it is, because, the nature of Tao is infinite. The depth of Tao is infinite, but the courage and the life of man is finite. It just is inevitably that way. A mystery is not an unsolved problem. A mystery is a mystery. It can eject images of ideas out of itself and visionary programs for transforming man or society or technology. But the mystery itself will remain forever a mystery. It has to descend through so many levels to communicate with us at all that there is no possibility of meeting with it except in this quintessential moment, wherever it may be in time, when all space condenses into a nutshell, when everything comes together. But that only happens once in the life of a cosmos. Otherwise, it is something which we anticipate in the imagination.